This is Microsoft Office Hours, and it is 8/22 of 2019. And today we have Deb McClinnan from SUNY here with us. And so, if you don't mind, Deb, explain to the folks a little bit about where you're from and what you're going to talk about today, and then the floor is yours.
Well, I work for one of the small four-year colleges in the state university system. I have a slide that basically describes Oneonta. I'm the Director of Systems and Data Center Management here at SUNY Oneonta. I'm also a project manager that manages projects across all of IT, and sometimes bigger than that, depending on what they need. So I get to be involved in things like our OneDrive implementation project. I get to be involved in Windows servicing, even though some of these things really don't have anything to do with systems. We also, in our Teams deployment, that kind of started here in our spaces because we tested and tinkered first and then decided we were going to bring in external departments before we brought in the rest of IT to do some testing and some piloting and some fun stuff to kind of get our feet wet. So, when you were talking earlier about, the organic nature of having teams roll out, we've kind of done it even crazier than that.
No, that's great. And so I just sort of put in the eye window for folks too what SUNY is. So it's the State University of New York, right? Just so everybody knows.
Yep, that's correct.
Excellent.
As a manager, I do have a PowerPoint if you want me to share that when you're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful. Take it away. That's awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'm not sure what you're seeing. Can you tell me?
We got you now. Yep, we're seeing about, and tell me how you say that one more time.
Oneonta.
Oneonta.
So you're getting it in slideshow mode?
Yes, now we have it in slideshow mode. We got it.
All right. Very good. Then it means that maybe I know a little bit about how the tech works. So anyway, about Oneonta. We're located in upstate New York. Most people know where Cooperstown is. We're about 24 miles from there. Our current enrollment is just a little over 6,000 students. We've got about 500 full-time and part-time faculty, about 1,400 employees, and about 50 IT staff, give or take. I've been at SUNY Oneonta. Well, I've done 2 tours here. I did a short tour for 3 years. I visited SUNY Albany for 6, and then my husband and I came home. And we've been here for almost 13 years in our second tour. So we spent a lot of time here. My husband went to school here. We've got a lot of friends. So, one of the things that we really like about working at Oneonta is that it's a community. It's not just a workplace. So we're friends with a lot of people that we work with all the time. So a lot of the fun stuff we get to do is really, it's fun at a different level. One of the things that I thought I should talk about, because in the different presentations that I've done, people think Oneonta is a little crazy. So when we first deployed Office 365, our CIO was, he didn't want us to limit the users. He wanted us to give the users every experience we could give them. And, there was a higher level mandate that we needed to get SharePoint out in the hands of the users as soon as we could. So our implementation of Office 365 and our expansion of Microsoft 365 and moving from A3 to A5 really has had what I tend to call our damn the torpedoes approach. It winds up being a little bit more reactive sometimes because every now and then the users are craftier than I am, and then we have to regroup and figure out how that happened, or what is it they're doing so we can rescue them. But for the most part, and you were talking earlier about the organic nature of things, it really has been a very positive thing. We've created these little areas where we have users that are a little more savvy, that are supporting 4 or 5 departments for us. and teaching them how to do whatever this thing is in SharePoint or that thing is in Teams. We're using groups this way. And then coming back to us if they need help with something they can't figure out. So it really has been an interesting ride, if you will. And to be honest with you, I thought I was older school IT. And when we first deployed this, our CIO at the time and I had a couple very spirited conversations about deployment in this fashion, and my thoughts on how I thought the whole thing was going to go. So I find it really interesting now that I'm on the other end of that, where I'm pushing.
Wow.
When something new comes out, I try to make sure that I see it in the message center, or I'm watching the roadmap and that kind of stuff, so that most of the time I know things are coming. But when something new is released, I'm pushing people to go look at it, try it out, test drive it. I'll wrap them into something if I can. So I think it's really interesting, and a lot of our team, our staff have kind of taken that new approach and that new philosophy, where it's like, all right, this is what we have. We're going to go out. We're going to sit with the users, and the users get a kick out of the fact that sometimes we're learning alongside them. That I don't always have the answer when I go sit with them, and it's more like, let me show me what you're doing, and I'll see if I can figure out why it's not working the way you expect it to. So there's a lot more seat of your pants kind of troubleshooting, and I wind up every now and then having to come back to my office, create some documentation, and send the knowledge base articles out to people after the fact. It's all right, so I saw this today, and this is how it works, and go do some testing and get back to me and see if there's anything we need to change in the docs. So I'm hoping that prefaces kind of some of the stuff that I'll talk about as we go through the rest of my presentation. But it really, you talked about governance earlier, and you talked about, building groups and basically putting boxes around the users. And, that's really, while we have governance and while we pay attention and we secure our users and we make sure they're safe, and, we're using a boatload of the Microsoft tools to do those things, we really feel like we've created an environment where they really feel empowered to do the things that they want to do every day. So today's topics. We'll talk a little bit about our move from the ESS contract, which was I think it was a New York State thing, but it's more of the going from the FTE-based E and A early licensing models to the more modern A3, A5 licensing models, what we did with knowledge workers and light workers, how we've deployed Office out to every computer that we own on campus using device-based activation, our OneDrive implementation project, and then some of the other tools and features of Office 365 that have made things easier for us to manage this new environment that we've created. We'll also talk a little bit about our Azure tenant and some of the stuff that we've thrown out there to make ourselves a little bit more highly available and some of the futures that we have there. If I don't get an opportunity to touch upon all these topics, my email is out there, and I'm happy to answer questions or, defend our philosophy if necessary. So the first thing we'll talk about a little bit here is our move from ESS to A5. The biggest factor that influenced our decision was our decision to not renew our virtual desktop environment. Because we have a fairly large computer lab fleet, we found that our VDI environment wasn't being used. So when it came time for the hardware and licenses for the software for that environment to be renewed, we decided we were going to take part of that savings and invest it in Office 365. So we moved from, at the time, what were E3 licenses and purchased A5 licenses with our campus agreement renewal. It was an interesting process. We were one of the first 2 SUNY schools to go this direction, and going from the FTE-based licensing model to the subscription-based licensing model. And we worked very closely with Microsoft and our reseller to kind of figure out how this is going to work, how that's going to work, to make our way through, actually deploying the new model. One of the things we found early on is that the subscription-based model didn't support the way that we deployed the operating system out to every machine on campus. We have some of our maintenance facilities folks that share a desktop in a shared office space where everybody logs in to go get their tickets, and then they all log out. But when you do a subscription-based license, there really wasn't a Windows license to put onto that desktop. So we worked very closely with our licensing folks at Microsoft and figure out how we were going to manage that aspect of putting a Windows desktop underneath every person on campus. So then we had to figure out the knowledge worker and light worker application, which were Microsoft shared the definition of what a knowledge worker and a light worker was them. And I work with our institutional research and human resources areas to figure out our population definitions. And what we've done is we're actually using attributes that we pull out of our HR data, which winds up being like user title codes from the SUNY and the state system, to determine who gets a knowledge worker license and who gets a light worker license. It works really well. That was one of the things that really surprised me, is that as long as we get the attribute right when we suck the data in, the licenses happen back and forth. People change roles. It really has worked really well, to the point that we're getting ready to light our new identity management application, and we've just mimicked all of the code we created in one place to put the other. So it really has been an easy way for us to figure out how those folks need to be identified. We're now far enough into this that we have the number of licenses we need to buffer. So we keep about 20 overhead, maybe a little more than that or a little less of that, depending on the year, so that if we get a rash of 10 or 15 employees get hired before the 10 or 15 people they're replacing leave, we can maintain the right level of licensing. So one of the challenges in this, though, is that there is more management. We do have to pay attention to licenses, where with the FTE-based model, you really didn't. So we keep an eye on, I'm in the Office 365 admin console all the time, and we keep an eye on, are we getting close? Do we need to do a little cleanup? Our admitted students get the EMS E5 licenses so they can do self-service password resets. But they're not really full-blown students yet, so they don't get their Office 365 experience. So we found that, we have times of year where we've got, a couple of thousand users out there that are really only using password reset, but, we get closer on licenses and we've got to go clean them up. One of the things that we have a hard time with is, the tools are very feature rich. And rolling out all of the options is, there are pieces we haven't touched yet. We haven't looked at Intune. We're not really managing mobile devices to that extent yet anyway. So, there are pieces of the environment that we haven't touched or figured out. And there are things that our users are using that, we haven't fully documented ourselves yet, and that's, things will come with time. So I said earlier that we've deployed the Office 365 version of Office out to all of our environment. And when we started doing this, we were trying to figure out how the licenses were going to work. And we reached out to our friends at Microsoft, and they sent us articles on the device-based activation. It did not take us long to deploy this. We're using this today. It works very well. We've figured out a couple of weird little things with how a user can be logged in at two places at one time, and sometimes the license needs to be reset, but there are tools for that, and we know the behavior, so we know how to fix it very quickly. But for the most part, this has been a rock solid deployment for us. We had a office hours session here just a month ago, not even a month ago, where we talked about the replacement for this, the subscription-based activations, and I've got my team already investigating what we're going to do next summer in this space. So our OneDrive implementation project, God, this one's been fun. we decided that because our infrastructure was at the point where we needed to make some serious choices, that we were going to migrate all of the home directories that lived on the local file service out to OneDrive. And then our CIO decided to up the ante a little bit for us and basically said that, oh, and we're going to do department shares too. So we have been, I want to say it's been a year since we started the project. I want to say I've got 12 or 13 administrative departments migrated to OneDrive for the home directories only. The SharePoint piece has been a little more challenging. We ran into 2 or 3 really weird problems that I think we created ourselves, but I think they're interesting. And we learned about some new technology that Microsoft is pushing in their modern desktop, that we've decided that we really want to take a serious look at trying to push in line at the same time that we're trying to do this project. So we don't do anything the easy way. So the challenges that we found, we have a lot of Windows 7 left on campus, and the version of the OneDrive sync tool that we wanted to deploy works on Windows 10 1709 and is native to Windows 10 1803. So we decided that before we would migrate a department or a user, they needed to be Windows 10 1803. So we had to stop before we started and go back out and start upgrading desktops. Then we found that we had a whole bunch of Windows 10 1507, 1511, and now 1603 machines that needed to be upgraded to 1803 because they're already in the play. So we really needed to take a step back, and what we've decided to do is new machines are going out for new users with all the fun bells and whistles that we can throw at them with the OneDrive sync tool. And we will work with those new users to connect them to SharePoint document libraries and that kind of thing as we deploy their new machines. For old machines, if a department is really chomping at the bit to migrate, we go in and we upgrade all their machines manually or via SCCM and Software Center. And then we go and we figure out all the weird little weirdness that we found. So we had full redirection policies in place applied via group policy that basically took a person's local shell folder from my documents, basically, and all the shell folders that exist there, and redirected them out to their home directory on the file service. What we found is that even though you might remove the policy from the computer, the shell folders do not revert back to the Windows defaults. So we had to figure out, we wrote a little shell script, a PowerShell script that we now, when we move the machine from their old OU to their new OU, the PowerShell executes and basically sets the folders back to the Windows defaults. And then we add the computer to a group that sets the group policy settings for the OneDrive sync tool and protect my files so that it redirects those shell folders back out to the OneDrive. That probably set us back a month because we had to unwrap what was actually happening at the desktops. When we tried to do the protect your files piece, it failed. When we tried to migrate data, it migrated itself back. So we had some interesting, troubleshooting that happened. But now we have a documented bulletproof process that all of our desktop folks can follow when they go out to desktops. We've also found that the policies we'd applied weren't for all machines, so we now know how to tell which machine has got the policy and which one doesn't. So it set us back a bit, but it now is something that is just part of the normal process. We also found that because our file service was, at the time, still Server 2008, we had long file name issues. So when we enabled the OneDrive sync, if the file names were too long on the file service, the OneDrive sync would fail. So we had to go through and identify all the files that were too long. We created a list so that when you go out to service the customer, you figured out if the customer was on your long files list, went and remediated your long files, and then you could go on in the next step of the process. So these are little things, but they slow you down. And I think my friends here on campus would tell you I'm probably not the most patient person. So when these things happen, I'm like, all right, now I'm a month behind. But I think we're doing the right things. Windows 10 servicing is going to be a huge boon for the campus, because it's not going to take us long to have them all on a similar ring for the upgrades that they're in. We're planning on deploying, I think, 8 or 9 different rings for servicing. So we'll have our, the Windows 10. It's not the early adopters. It's the insiders ring, and then, early adopters, and then, adventurous users, and then on out, basically, so that over the course of a year, everybody will get to the same version of Windows 10, and then we'll start all over again. So we're looking forward to that. The SharePoint migration is a little bit more challenging because it kind of runs up against our identity management project. We're still defining owners for a lot of the shares, and creating our approval processes so that when someone asks for access to share number 1, the approval happens through identity management. So we're kind of backing off, migrating data from the file service out to SharePoint until we figure out the workflows for identity management, so we can do that in an easier way. So we have the data. We're keeping it where it is until we're ready to move it, and we're kind of, 1 and 2ing the ones that we really need to move early on. But it really is. It's been an interesting project, and the users that we have migrated are raving about being able to do everything remotely, and it all connects together, and the sharing, and so they are basically telling their friends. So we have a bigger queue of people that want to go than we have that don't want change. So we're kind of pleased with that that circumstance. So we decided that we were going to go all in, and we piloted with a small number of users using just Exchange Online protection for our threat protection inside Office 365 for email. We were really pleased with the performance. So our pilot group lasted all of, I think, 3 months before we decided we were going to expand the pilot, and I don't think it was 2 months after that we actually pulled the Barracudas out of line and we went straight up EOP. The spam and phishing filtering seemed to improve significantly when we removed the Barracudas from inline. And we don't have the contract with Barracuda anymore. We've actually sent the appliances back. We're very happy with what's going on, and the users don't know that any of this has happened in the background. So for me, that's a really successful deployment. We've enabled safe attachments across the campus. People are curious about what it is that's going on, but nobody's really complained, which I think is kind of interesting, because sometimes their attachments don't go through and they don't understand why. But it's been, our IT security group has done a really good job in advertising, and they handle most of the, when people do get confused by what's going on, it's worked really well. So we're really glad we've done that. We have probably given up on safe links. We're using mail flow rules to create custom spam and phishing filters, and that seems to be working for us now. We'll probably revisit that in a while, but we just weren't pleased with the way that it performed for what we were trying to do. So as part of our A5, we've deployed Defender ATP out to the entire fleet of Windows 10 devices here on campus. That includes desktops, labs, learning spaces, laptops, anything that'll take it, got it. And we're really, it really is saving us time. We chose not to deploy to Windows 7. We're focusing our efforts on trying to get rid of all those Windows 7 machines for, the 4 projects I talked about beforehand. This is also managed by our IT security group, so they are looking at, the logging, They said that it provides them more clarity on incidents. They no longer need to rely on user descriptions of events. They can actually see what happened. And investigations that used to take us days are now done in as little as 15 minutes. So these are really huge time-saving measures, and it's in real time, and that's one of the things that's been a big, help to us, is that when somebody has something happen, it doesn't spread because we see it happen. So when Microsoft decided that they were going to release Defender ATP for Mac, we did the same thing. We piloted it as soon as we could get our hands on it. We rolled it out to labs and learning spaces, as it wasn't even GA yet when we'd done that. And then when it was released to general availability, we put it on all the desktops that are Macs. Because that's so new, we really can't tell you how effective it's been. But deployment, similar tools, same console, everything seems to be working the way we would want it to. So we're really excited about what this is going to mean for us. So we are a heavy education school. We create teachers. That is what the, when the Oneonta Normal School opened back in the 1800s, it was a school for educators. So when Minecraft was released to our environment, I had the folks from our Masters in Ed Tech and our counseling ed, and I can't remember what the two other education departments came and talked to me about Minecraft. So we piloted it with our master teachers. They paid it forward because they actually have continuing ed folks that come back to the campus. So we were able to work with them to show them how that worked for their K through 12 environments. And to do all this for the rest of the campus after we finished our pilot, we actually had to light the Microsoft store for Oneonta. We waited until the recent change in licensing, so all that licensing happens through the normal channels instead of using the way that the store wanted to do it to begin with. We deployed the application and all the ancillaries out to targeted computer labs to begin with, for the places where those ed professors were teaching and where their students were going to collaborate. And then we deployed it out to everything for this fall semester. We announced it to our Educational Technology Committee, which is one of our governance committees, so that we got more instructors using the tools in different ways. And it's been a pretty popular deployment for us. And it was a pretty easy win. There wasn't a whole lot to setting it up and getting it out into spaces. So we were, this is one of those things where it's like, here it is, have a good time. And I think one of the challenges we have is that some of our instructors want us to set up the server on the internal side so that they can collaborate that way. So we're looking into how that's all going to work in the end. So Power BI. One of the things that we get with our A5 licenses is everybody gets Power BI. That was a big deal for our CIO at the time because he's a data junkie. And he wanted to be able to share data and create dashboards collaboratively across different divisions and departments on campus. And this was an easy way for us to do that. We got a little further into sharing data and that kind of thing, and we worked with our IT security group to actually build a Power BI gateway. So I've got a Power BI gateway server here on campus that we manage that connects to different data sets and sources. We're using Banner data, both our operational data store and our transactional database, and our Vice President for Enrollment Management has done some really cool enrollment and retention Power BI dashboards. We were fortunate enough to get him to present with us at the Microsoft Spring event for higher ed in Albany this spring, but I wasn't able to get him for today. But they're doing some really cool stuff. We are actually looking in IT to start taking some of our computer lab utilization data and creating dashboards so that we can show the departments how we're using the resources that the campus gives us and how they're using the resources, so that when we talk about cyclic replacement of, departmental computer labs or even some of our teaching and general purpose labs, we're making sure that we're putting our resources where they really need to be put. We're going to be pulling metrics out of our ITSM application to start really providing dashboards to our users, basically showing them how we're doing for them. And we're talking about creating a data working group to kind of do some grassroots adoption of different pockets of people that have been trying to do data visualization, but not really sure how to get themselves there. So we haven't got that off the ground yet, but it's something that we're talking with our institutional research friends, and Kevin Jensen, our enrollment services director, is also involved in those discussions.
Hey, Deb, great information. We got about two or 3 minutes left, and we're gonna have to flip over here because we're getting to the top, past the top of the hour. Just for what it's worth.
Well, I have 2 slides left, so I'll talk fast. So I have Teams up next. So we piloted Teams here on campus as soon as it was released. We got serious this spring. We told the campus before graduation that we were going Teams only mode. We flipped the switch on the 14th, which I think was last week. We're ramping up training and documentations, and I've been talking about creating a TeamsU proof of concept. So basically using IT to create some really fun and interesting and useful and efficient Teams environments that we're going to go out and then show off to the rest of the campus. A lot of prep went into this. A lot of research went into this. We had Chris and Manny from Microsoft do a number of calls with us on this. It was really, this was a cool, fast project. And now we are Teams only, so no more Skype for us. One of the bigger things that we did was we put an Azure tenant online, and we took our ADFS environment and replicated it in Azure so that we now have single sign-on in the cloud. So all of our software as a service, including Office 365, Blackboard, and a number of smaller services where the campus has used software as a service for things, now aren't dependent on the campus network. We actually used a partner to help us do all this work. And again, it was Josh and Dave got us connected with the right people, and they came in for a week. We got where we needed to be, and now we're expanding what's out in Azure. We're doing a public DNS project. We're doing external alerting. We're looking at outage maintenance, web services, and investigating the feasibility of business continuity and disaster recovery using Azure, and some of the new cool stuff with VMware. So that is all I have. I'm sure there's probably more questions than I have answers for, but I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Let's do this just for the sake of recording. I'm going to take just a moment and stop the recording, and then I'm happy to stick around if you are and answer a few questions.
Yeah, I'm here.